Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Hans Bruyninckx. I'm the Executive Director of the European Environment Agency. Welcome to this plenary session, where the focus will be on the use of INSPIRE-compliant data, or broader, on spatially determined information and data, and how we can put that to use for the transition to the green economy that is badly needed if we want to stick to our commitments under the Paris Agreement, under the SDG framework that we know. We have a fantastic panel set up here with mainly people who are doing this in a very innovative way in their daily work, who work with market actors, with public actors, and who will really put, I would say, partially your work to use in their professional life to the benefit of those who are using it. The way we have set this panel up is that I will give a short introduction on how, from an agency's perspective, we use this type of data and information. Then I will introduce the panelists, because we want to see how a public vision on INSPIRE, it's a European policy and information project, how that is then used in the private market. Very briefly, the EEA's mission is closely linked to, I think, the goals of INSPIRE. First of all, our key task is to provide information to policy-making agents and the public, and we do that with a strong emphasis on improving the environment and on supporting sustainable development. In general, we do that in line with the vision that is deeply embedded in the 7th Environment Action Programme, the guiding document for European environment and climate policies, where the goal is by 2050 to live well within the limits of the planet. And in order to do that, we have to make three fundamental transitions. One is from a high carbon to a low carbon society. The other one is to become a more circular economy, where we keep the physical components and the value of resources in our economy longer in a sustainable way, and then of course protecting natural capital. This is the essence of the green economy from an environmental perspective, and the question today is in this panel, how can we put INSPIRE compliant type data to use? Yeah? The way we look at this is that we will never get there if we don't take a systemic perspective, and the systemic perspective in our mind is focusing on four key systems: the energy system, the food system, the mobility system, and the urban system. If we think of the energy system, the big transition is on the side of production, but also on the side of the negative externalities of the current system. And let's see how we tend to use the type of data that we have today. Last year in Paris, we launched our European Air Quality Index. It allows you for about 8,000 stations in Europe to get hourly updates on air quality. We are complementing the traditional monitoring with Copernicus data, and if you want to do that in a convincing and solid way, you have no other choice than to go through a system that links spatially determined data in a specific way. By the way, a traditional air quality report might get 1,000 people reading it or putting it on their shelves. We had 3.7 million visitors looking into this information. Yeah? Another system is, of course, the food system, where we will have to bring this in line with the circular economy, with the bioeconomy, with the Paris Agreement, and we are rather far removed from that. So the question is, how can we link information on the food system to this sustainability agenda? Just one idea: this is a map of the world that looks at where Europe, for its production, is getting the inputs from soy. And you can see that Latin America is the big spot. Now here, this is determined on a really broad level. It's almost continental. We think that with better data, spatially determined, in getting land use data from Copernicus connected to in situ data, we can get a much more precise idea of what the impact is, the footprint of European food systems on the planet. Another system is the urban system where we have all sorts of challenges ahead of us, going from mobility systems to adapting to climate change and dealing with water in the cities. A couple of examples. This is the city of Antwerp, where you are today. This is an old map of the city. With the new Sentinel data, we have much better maps of the city, where the red areas refer to information, biomass information. So you see how this operates. It will allow us much more to work with green in the city, with blue in the city, and to link the livability of cities in a much more refined way. The last system I would briefly want to highlight is the mobility system, where again, we have different layers of data that we can link in ways to give us information that can be useful for urban planners. This is, of course, the typical map of Europe based on big data of traffic conditions. We use it through our GPS all the time. This is Copenhagen, where the agency is located. You can overlay this with refined data on air quality, and you can start mapping the link between mobility patterns and air quality, and then you can even make the link to health impacts. You can only do that if you have a credible system that links these data in a spatially determined way. In general, the agency organizes its information along the MDIAK chain. We start from monitoring, and then we create data and indicators. We then use our intelligence, and we make assessments that can ultimately lead to knowledge for policymakers. The fundamentals of this whole system are supported by Inspire. Yeah? We also notice that our data services are used by others. In 2018, we expect 260 million map-based data requests from EEA data. We can only provide that sort of information if there is a credible system that allows for linking spatially determined data and information. We start to see the same with our Copernicus land data, where we have the European responsibility. There is a strong increase in the downloads of that type of land data, which is of course encouraging, because the whole idea of sending billions in an orbit around this little blue planet is to spend the millions on making it available for users, and that is exactly what we are trying to do. A last example linked to the rather extreme weather phenomena of last summer. Even in Scandinavia, we had forest fires. As you know, this is a map from Sweden. We can get better and better data based on better satellites, better information of some of these fires. You can then translate that in Inspire-compliant information, in this case of Copernicus Emergency Management Services, and then you can go into detailed follow-up of what this means. I will not get into details, but it is obvious that linking data in a specific way and making it available allows policymakers and those working to deal with these issues on the ground, give them better information. In general, I would say, from our perspective, Inspire supports the sharing of increasing amounts of data. The systemic integration of the knowledge base is what drives our connection to Inspire. It provides the infrastructure, it streamlines e-reporting, it standardizes spatial data as it is used by the EEA and our network, and I think it allows for underpinning more integrated data and analysis, which we will badly need if we want to support the green economy with the type of information that is needed. The answer is not big data. Big data is out there. The real question is whether big data produces more noise or whether we have the type of infrastructure to create better sound. Yeah? We are in this concert hall, the sound is fantastic here, but that is exactly what we are trying to do. Not create more noise, but better sound. I will stop here, but I will now give the floor to the panelists who will talk about the transition to a green economy from their perspective. We have three speakers. Arash Aazami, the CEO of Kamangir, and I captured, preparing and looking at websites and what these people are doing, what he's going to talk about in one phrase, the Internet of Energy. Yeah. Then we have Janneke Hadders, the CEO of Dacom Farm Intelligence, and I capture what she will talk about under data solutions for 21st century food production. And then Claire Falzone, the CEO of Nova Veolia, and here my capture is supporting startups with innovative digital services. So we've got a fantastic lineup. I will be, and this is not a surprise to them, brutally sharp in timekeeping. Yeah. So that at the end of the panel, at least we can have some exchange with you. There are the two microphones. Any questions there would be, I will navigate us through the time that we have to interact with you, the audience, and the main players in this conference. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Claire Falzone, and I'm in charge of Nova Veolia, which is a subsidiary of Veolia operating in digital services and startups. Thank you very much, Mr. Bruyninckx, for your introduction and for your invitation. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to express the point of view of Veolia and similar operators regarding this very, very important question, is how do we transition to green economy, and using, obviously, geospatial data is key to do so. A few words on Veolia, maybe for those of you who don't know this company. We are the global leader for providing environmental services to municipalities and industrial, and we operate in waste, water and energy. Just to give you a few figures, we produce water services for 100 million persons in the world, waste services for 60 million persons in the world, and we operate in 45 countries. We are a French company, and 75% of our activity takes place in the European Union. So the acquis communautaire, and more generally the European legislation, is absolutely key for us, because the more governments and institutions are ambitious for the environment, the more space we have to propose new services, to invent new ways of improving our environment. We created Nova Veolia because we are absolutely sure that to realize the mission we have, which is to resource the world, digital in general, data in particular, are absolutely key to invent new services. We really need first to improve and digitize the way we do our traditional activities, but we really have to invent new services which are based on new technology and obviously new sources of information like data and geospatial data. So we created Nova Veolia, which is actually a corporate venture fund which invests in startups and in projects. And the three main priorities for us is first to gather more and more data, and therefore to have the most connected technologies. It can be IoT, and it can be obviously data coming from geospatial unities. And it can also be to invent new tools to help our customers to become smart cities. And it's also important for us to invent new tools to provide services to the citizens, because we think that every citizen, every inhabitant has to be actor of this environmental transition we have to organize. To give you two concrete examples of the tools we try to develop based on the use of data, just a quick idea. We have millions of connected objects now in the world. We have water sensors, we have sensor related to leakage detections, we have sensor in our trucks. We have connected objects absolutely everywhere. And the question now is, what do we do with all this data? And I would like to present two tools about what we can do with data. The first one, which is going to appear on the screen, is first contextualize data. All this data, we have to help our customers, the cities, the citizens, to understand what it means and how it can use. So the first tool, and it's a quick video, is named Urban Board, and it's how we put all this information in an understandable way.
Can you imagine a city so smart it can monitor its own waste, water and energy, reduce its carbon footprint, and predict its own future second by second? Well, there's no need to imagine. It's already here. Welcome to a city where bin sensors measure volume of waste and send alerts to collection crews, saving on unnecessary visits. Where GPS on refuse collection vehicles track progress and provide proof of service. And weighing equipment calculates precisely how much waste is collected by material type from every single commercial customer. Where a response team is gathering all this information and handling customer queries right now as they happen, with up-to-the-second facts at their fingertips, whilst also monitoring recycling rates, planning efficient collection routes, and saving fuel. Where sensors in water network operations are providing continuous data to help understand consumption levels, leakage volumes, blockages, and flooding potential. And sensors in energy plants capture data that engineers are using to provide world-class operational support, invaluable for essential services such as hospitals and airports. Accurate, factual information that stakeholders trust. Welcome to a city where all this rich data converges in one central hub, where a team of analysts are gleaning unrivaled insights, enabling businesses to make the best possible decisions, where by combining live data with additional information, they are accurately predicting satisfaction levels and helping customers save resources, preserve the environment, and enhance their reputation. Time for imagination is over. Welcome to Veolia's digitized smart city, reading the future so you can shape yours.
So if you don't concentrate on this very nice commercial voice, the point is, really, we believe that with all this data, now we have to invent new services, and we are able to invent these new services. But to do so, we need proper data, we need clean data, we need a huge amount of data. And the second purpose we intend to follow with this data is to put artificial intelligence in the monitoring of this data, in the analysis of this data, to be able to take the right decision at the right moment. And to do so, to have a correct purpose to put artificial intelligence in it, we have to gather a lot of data. And that's the point where obviously geospatial data comes, and Inspire framework as well, because we were very, very happy in 2007 to welcome the Inspire framework, because having access to this data is absolutely key. Water doesn't stop at the border, obviously, and if you want to benchmark a local situation with a similar situation outside, or to be able to predict what is going to happen in a climate perspective, for instance, you need to have this data. So it was really, for us, a very important step, which has been important for the last 10 years. The question is now, what are the stakes of the next 10 years regarding the Inspire framework and the strategy, the data strategy that the European Union is key to promote? I see three main challenges. The first one is balancing the need for transparency and the security of the infrastructure. Obviously, we need more data, and we really believe that transparency is key for the cities, for the citizen, for any people interested in transitioning to a greener economy. And we also believe that there are specific dimensions for each sector, and we strongly approve the Commission's strategy to follow a sectoral approach, because each sector has its own specificity. If you take the water sector, for instance, I think nobody wants the full information related to a water network to be available online easily with full details on where are the different parts of this network, because there are a risk of security, vital security, if this information are misused. So the balance between opening the data, opening the transparency, and taking into account the specificity of each hectare is key. The European Commission promotes it through, obviously, for instance, the drinking water directive, so through sectoral approach, and we strongly support this. I think some very interesting proposals have been sent to the member of state member, and we hope they will follow this reasonable way. The second challenge we have to face is really how to find together the way to finance innovation and research in data management, in data analysis, in data visualization and intelligence, artificial intelligence, and so financing this and respecting privacy of the data. Once again, we have seen actors being able to invest a lot because what they were doing from the data was mainly commercial. Thanks to the European Union, we have powerful tools to avoid our data to be only used in a commercial way. We have, I think some of you have heard about it, GDPR, and it's absolutely key for us, and we were very, very strong supporters of this framework. And the second tool that the European Union has is innovation funds. We are part of some of these funds. We mentioned this morning the Key Climate, the Key Digital, and these are very important tools to create an ecosystem where researchers, cities, citizens, institutions, private operators can share together the priorities they want to follow to analyze and use data in a very strategic way and not only in a commercial way. The third challenge I would like to mention is how do we empower the cities to be part of the use of their data? Cities provide data. Their citizens provide data. They can see operators and they hire operators which provide data as well, but so far they have not yet take the full, obviously not control, but measure of the stakes that are beyond. And we really believe that, especially for geospatial data, you need to find a place where people can speak and together about what do we want to do with the data. And you have to make sure that the use of the data is coherent with the political and strategy of a city. For instance, if a city has major air quality issues, it has to be able to use the data that are produced in its city to improve traffic jam, for instance. So we really believe that it's time for the cities to take into account that they have a role, that they should play a role, and we try to propose them services and help, but I think that this is an issue as well for the European institution to have the cities to come and speak about this issue. So to conclude, thanks again for letting us express this view of an operator of environmental services. I strongly believe that we have many, many things to invent together. We have to balance data transparency with reasonable framework to protect the safety of people using vital services such as water or energy. And I'm very happy to know that the European Commission has completely taken this into account and tried to find balanced solution with all the stakeholders and listening to every point of view. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. The next speaker will be Arash, who will focus on the energy system and the data and sustainability revolution that we have ahead of us there. Arash, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Hans, and it's so wonderful to be here, especially with a background as a musician, to be in this room where the Philharmonic usually plays. I'm a bit humbled. So Yeah, as I said, it's wonderful to be here, and I would like to share some stories with you about energy. First of all, my personal background, because that is really one of the reasons that made me enter into this field. I did not grow up in Europe. My parents were development workers, so we as kids grew up in Niger in West Africa. And the boy that you see in the middle is me, and next to me is my brother Omid and our neighbor Amadou. And we are watching television, which in the town that we used to live in was a special thing because there were only 2 televisions. And there were broadcasts 3 times per week from one national broadcast. And we could watch them provided that there was electricity at that time, which was oftentimes not the case because we had power cuts every day. So watching television in that sense is a rather luxurious thing. And even today in Niger, the energy access ratio is only 14%. So access to modern forms of energy is only 14%, which brings Niger, if we're looking at some data sets, to the 9th most energy poor country in the world in terms of access. And where you see that roughly half of the countries in the world have a 100% access ratio. Now, this costs people in Niger a lot of time. That's what energy poverty costs, it's time. Because the time that we, basically the amount of labor that we can get done by the flick of a switch needs to get done there by collecting wood, for instance, so that people can cook. And this, on a rough estimate, amounts to almost 50% of the waking hours of mainly the women in energy poor countries. Now, spending so much time on fulfilling your basic energy needs also says that you're not able to spend that time on education or earning an income or spending quality time with your families. So really, this is a setback in development, and that's why I believe that we really should strive for universal access to modern forms of energy. Now, in Niger, 14% energy access is a bit of a strange thing, because in the meantime, Niger is also the 4th largest uranium exporter in the world. But the people of Niger do not have access to their own resources. And it is also the 2nd best solar pattern holding country in the world. So in terms of sunlight, it's the 2nd best country in the world. And this is why I believe that this revolution that we are looking at for sub-Saharan Africa is really at hand right now. When I entered into the field of energy in 2006, I did online tech before that for a number of years. I entered into energy, and first I asked myself, what is energy? And one of the things that really struck me was that the professionals that I used to work with, they would give all these very scientific answers that sound like this or this, and then we had an office in Barcelona, it sounded like this. And people don't know what energy is, so then you're going to analyze what is energy, and energy is so simple. It is the ability to do work. It's the ability to get something done. And therefore it is so important, because to get work done is the fundamental of our real economy, the economy of tangibles. What do we use all this energy for? We use it for light, for heat, for mobility, for comfort, and most of the energy in the world is used for productivity purposes. Earning incomes, for instance. So we're not talking kilowatt hours or cubic meters or all kinds of abstractions. This is what energy is really about. Energy is the real economy, as I said, because everything we touch, everything we use, everything we produce exists thanks to a flow of energy. And that is how it is so fundamental. It's more fundamental than money flows, for instance. It's real. And the entire real economy in the world amounts to 155,000 terawatt hours per year, which is a very abstract number. So I decided to make it a little bit more visual for you and translate it into joules. Now everybody understands what the world economy is about. But if we would have all these joules produced by solar panels, and that's not only for electricity, but also for heating and mobility, then we would require 300 billion solar panels that we need to line up with the technologies of today. And if we would line them up, they would cover a space that amounts to this country, Spain. Basically, this says if we cover Spain with solar panels, with the technologies of today, we can fulfill the entire humanity's energy needs from renewable resources. It's as simple as that. Problem and solution right there in one image. Now, how did this entire thing occur, and how did we get all this knowledge? This is a chart that was given to me in 2007 by who was then the director of the Irish Energy Institute, the Dundalk Institute of Technology, Lawrence Stout. And Lawrence gave me this image and asked me, what is this? What do you see here? And I looked at it and I didn't know. It was the rise and fall of mankind, or the voters for a certain political party, or it could be anything. But this is fossil fuel consumption by humans throughout the history of mankind and the future of mankind. And this image shows so much, because whatever we refer to as alternative energy right now, we call that sun and wind, is actually conventional because we have always used it. And the actual alternative energy is oil and coal and gas. That's that little peak in the middle. We started using fossil fuels around the Industrial Revolution. And right now we're around this point, and we are making this entire glider flight down to a 100% renewable-based society again. How is that going to occur? Well, it's physical, it's physics. The Earth took around 500 million years to build up the resources that we know today. We take around 500 years to burn them, so we are going 1 million times too quickly. So that means that, no matter how you put it, we will get rid of fossil fuels sometime soon. And it takes around 1 or maybe 2 generations. I think it's going to be 1 generation to get to a 100% renewable-based society again. That means that this transition to renewables is not a choice. It's going to happen whatsoever. And that also means that we need to change our thinking on energy. In order to spend our energies on yelling about what is going wrong in the world, we could actually spend that exact amount of energy trying to build new models that are going to make the old model obsolete, just as Richard Buckminster Fuller said. Wonderful book, by the way, Critical Path, 1981. And so here we are thinking about these new models. One of the new models that we developed for the province of South Holland 2 years ago was the concept of a smart multi-commodity grid. And why is this important? Well, if we're looking at the history of telecom grids, for instance, between 30 years and 25 years ago, they would spend billions and billions and billions of euros. They weren't euros then, but calculate them in euros, into new grids for digital communications. We had ISDN grids, ADSL grids, and those were all developed with investment scopes of around 40 to 50 years, and they had to write them off after 10 years. Why? Because the technology that we were deploying by that time was entirely new, and we needed another grid. So now it's all glass fiber. And with energy, we're looking at the same things. As long as we use technologies to define the design of our grids, we're not going to get there, because we'll have to write them off, because technologies will follow upon one another. But if we use the actual use, light and heat and comfort and mobility and productivity, as a design principle for our grids, we can actually design them over multiple technologies. We wrote a report at that time, and it started with a joke, which is The Drunkard Search by Abraham Kaplan, an American philosopher in the 1960s. And the Drunkard Search, in this report From Volume to Value, was about this drunkard who was looking for his keys underneath a street light somewhere in the streets of some city. Let's say it's Antwerp. And then there was this policeman who walked by and asked, "What's wrong?" And then the drunkard said, I lost my keys. Could you help me find them?" And then the policeman says, "Sure." So they look for the keys for a number of minutes, and then the policeman asks, "Are you sure that your keys were lost here?" And then the drunkard looks up at him and says, No, I lost them in the park." And then the policeman asks, "So why are you looking for them here underneath this street light?" "Well, because there's light here." And if we're looking at energy transition, we usually try to solve things literally where the light is shining. We're trying to exchange the one bulb for another. But if we looked at all the data that we were accessing, we could actually compare data in such a way that we found out that if we would make all the electricity use in the built environment in the province of South Holland sustainable, we would have solved 1% of the problem. Because the other 99% is where the light does not shine, and that's in the industries, that's in agriculture, that's in mobility, and that's in heating in the built environment, which is already 5 times the amount of energy that we are consuming for electricity in the built environment. So there's, by setting things in the same standards, I think that we can create a lot of clarity. Right now, 1.6 million buildings in the province of South Holland are heating themselves with natural gas. And that amounts to an amount of energy that is 73 petajoules. At the same time, the amount of heat that is residual heat from industrial processes in the port of Rotterdam, right around the corner, is 150 petajoules. And that's heat that we're throwing away. So there's a lot of gain that we can make from using data from several sets, comparing them, and give that to policymakers so that they can actually make policies that last. And in this case, help the province of South Holland to become independent of natural gas and use their own waste to heat all their homes. So, as I said, it's not about the technology; it's about the use that should be really at the pinnacle of every design principle that we make for our grids. Now, if we're going to go on about this, the smart multi-commodity grid is basically a mapping of the energy system that we know today. What we did was we divided everything into molecules and electrons, and we really mapped out all the import lines, the production lines of energy, the use of energy, connecting everything together, and really showing where should we convert energy from one form into the other, for instance, to make a grid very smart and minimize losses over those grids. The second study, this has been the study of the status quo. The second study just started this month, which is going to continue until January, and then we're going to publish a new report with scenario studies for an entirely interconnected and interoperable smart grid for the entire province. What I believe in is that we should develop our grids resource independent and carrier independent. And that also will amount to new users in this smart multi-commodity grid, because already we can regard many users as prosumers, producers and consumers at the same time, but also those who like trading, for instance, or who are really using when energy is there on a flexible basis, for instance, charge your electric vehicle when there's an abundance of wind, or conversumers who may convert a certain amount of energy into heat, for instance, so that they can use it during the winter time, are also going to be new business models that are going to arise on these grids. And this all is actually leading into what I believe is the Internet of Energy. If we're looking at the birth of the web, we have Tim Berners-Lee here in 1989 who developed the www protocol, and helped by a number of other standards and protocols, this really enabled the entire world to be connected together and to democratize data, and to go from this centralized data distribution model to distributed models such as Wikipedia, where everybody can take some knowledge from it, but also add knowledge to it. And what I believe is that we can do the same with energy. We're moving away from this model, which is centralized and looks like this in real life, through this model, which is a decentralized model, where we're having all these microgrids more or less smart. There's 1,869 microgrid projects today in the world. Looks like this, like the rooftop of Rotterdam Central Station, where I live, and going to this entirely distributed model, where you can no longer tell whether some node on the system is a producer or a consumer. Everything is a prosumer. And these energy prosumers are free to download energy from the grid, upload energy to the grid, regardless of the resource that they're using, and regardless of the carrier that they're translating energy into. And we need protocols and we need standards to make this possible. Now, what we are developing right now is a way to embed information about energy within a unit of produced energy, which means that your kilowatt hour that you are taking from the grid also contains information on where does it come from, what was the resource, what exact solar panel has produced it, at what moment, what is the route that this energy has taken, and what is the amount of exergy. It misses a Y there. So how much of the energy is still left over at the end of the road. And using this information also enables, for instance, grid operators to deploy artificial intelligence to optimize routing, which is going to minimize losses, for instance. So we can fully track and trace energy. Already, right now, we're looking at energy losses between production and final use in the Netherlands of 37%. And we can reduce that by a number of percents by optimizing routes, for instance, over all these carriers, which means that we can shut down a coal-fired plant without having to replace it by wind farms and still use the same amount of energy at the end. And the purpose that we're working on is that we really believe in universal access to clean and renewable energy. And thereby I want to close down by showing you one example that this could lead to, and this is a glacier in the desert that was designed by a friend of mine, an artist in The Hague, which is consisting of solar panels that are producing electricity, that are cooling a fluid that is running underneath these panels, underneath 0 degrees Celsius, which is condensing moist from the air, turning that into ice. And by now already we are seeing prototypes in Mali that are producing water and electricity just out of the abundance that nature has to give to us. So that is the final example that I would love to give to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Arash. I think we go from glaciers in the desert now to the fields of the Netherlands, where people are producing our food. So, Janneke, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. The clicker. Yes, I come from a farming family. My family has been farming for generations, for hundreds of years. My father, he was born in 1948, and in 1977 he took over the family farm. But he was more like an inventor, and he was more like a pioneer in technology than he was really a farmer. So I remember back in the 80s that he already collected all sorts of data sets, but also maps of his fields. And he gathered them from all sorts of places, and he tried to store them in databases already and to digitalize them. And he did that because he wanted to know what happened on his field by his family, by his father, and by his father. So he could make better farming decisions. And of course, because it was all pieces of paper, it didn't really lead to a lot of things. And it was not georeference data like it is today. But it was the start of the company that he founded in the late 80s, and that was Dacom. By that time, well, he managed, even though georeference data was not available at that time, he did manage to collect data in all sorts of forms and put on top of that algorithms to help farmers make better decisions. It's actually, this is the company I took over from him, and it's actually, well, it's the same principle as it is today. So this is a picture of it, how it was like. Maybe it's not even that long time ago. It was in 2011, and there was no georeference data in our software. Well, again, Dacom collects all sorts of data. So that can be data from sensors, our own sensors, weather stations, soil moisture sensors, but also weather forecast, data from, crop recording systems from the farmer himself, what he puts in the system himself, and how it's developing now that the tractor can also provide us with lots and lots of data. It's still stored in a central data bank. It's now in the cloud. It's not more, well, on the farm where he started out the company. And in 2013, I took over this company. Important is what we do with the data, of course. So what we do is, on the bottom end, you see, well, we can give information to the farmer when he needs to irrigate and how much he needs to irrigate. Disease management, which is fungal diseases. Fungal diseases like Phytophthora in potatoes, they can destroy complete fields if you don't treat them with chemical treatments. So we can provide the farmer information on the timing of when to put on those chemical treatments, in which he can really time his resources and plan it better. One of my findings, because when I took over the company, my primary focus was to get everything online and get everything in the cloud. And over those years, one of the most important things I saw was the access of open data sets that we can use to make, well, farmers make better decisions. Thanks to websites in the Netherlands like these, we have, have good access to this data. And that's what we provide, digital farms to farmers. So today we are here to gather more insights on the relationship between geodata and a green economy, and also how Inspire can empower the instruments that we can develop, well, to make better, to better plan resources. And I would like to give you one example of our product suite, where we use geo-reference data, to help farmers make better decisions. It's a website. It's called Boerenbundler, which is in the net, if you translate it, it's called Boeren and his fields and his acres. It's really, easy because it's the only thing it does is visualize all available data sets about the farmer's fields. So a farmer clicks on a field, any field in the Netherlands, and data is shown. Data in this picture, you can see the data shown on a field level, but also regional level. So farmers have easy access to, all available data sets. This morning I was in a session and I saw all sorts of data sets, but somehow it doesn't get to the farmer, and this site brings it to the farmer. We also created a filter, because 700,000 fields are in this website, in this database. And how do you find this one field that you would like to buy, or that you would like to know something more about? So we made a filter that a farmer can enter in what province he wants it, what size. 3 years ago there should have been potatoes on that, and if you click on the specific elements, it shows the fields that a farmer needs to or wants to have more information about. Height maps. So we have, over time, we have entered 3 different height maps in the system. It doesn't fluctuate that much over time, but in, let's say 10 years it does, because where I come from, in the north of the Netherlands, the government is pumping up gas, and we have earthquakes. And also, the land, it goes down and it might go up, and a farmer needs to know that. So if you have these maps over time and visualize it in this way, a farmer knows what's happening in his fields, and if there are places where he should go look because, the ground has been shifting and moving up and down. Important field characteristics. What has been on there for the last 10 years? And one favorite thing of a farmer is to know how big it is. What is actually the size? But usually people are a bit exaggerating about it. It's bigger or smaller depending on where you need the data for. But this is sort of the truth. It starts to be a standard of being the truth. This is how big this field is. Also, you can have, through WhatsApp, you can tell people where is the field that you need to go do something on my field. One nice thing, soil types. So you can have access to all sorts of, all the data sets of soil types. Cadastral information. Cadastral information is, of course, not something, it doesn't necessarily need, has overlap with the field of a farmer and what he puts on there. And another very cool thing is, of course, the satellite images over time. And that we can, tell something about how is your plant growing in the fields. Are the typical places where you need to go to find out why a plant is growing, and look for more information on why a plant is growing faster than in one place than in another. How does such an innovative idea start? It actually started on a workshop, on a pitch with a Geodan workshop. But the idea came from a farmer, a very innovative farmer in the south of the Netherlands.
And he said, well, they use our crop recording software, which also includes all this data. But he says, my father is looking for fields, and he's drawing all the time one field, and then he gets the information, and then he has to delete the field again. So it would be so nice if we could have a website where you can have, with 1 or 2 or 3 clicks, all the information available. And that was actually, well, that is how Boerenbønder started. Some facts. So we went live in 2016. That was the first, first demo, and it was well received, even though farmers were sometimes very, very angry because no one knew that there was so much open data available already. So this was the first time people really could see what data was actually available of all fields. So we had, over that time, 300,000 unique visitors and 2.3 thousand daily users, which is for Dutch agronomical standards, very high. The user groups. So from farmers, the group expanded also to contract workers, specifically to where is the farm, where is something located. Real estate agents are very, of course, very interested in this data, but also governments. We see them also taking up licenses. The first time we saw data from Boerenbønder being shown in a legal fight, then we knew we were doing something good, because it gives a certain information about the truth. My dream is to expand this kind of websites on a worldwide level, so that we have this data available for all farmers in the world. And for that, we need data. I would like to start in the European Union, so that's very good that we're here together. Maybe you can help me with that. Directives like Inspire or frameworks like Inspire, they are essential to get to these kind of innovative products. So I would say, please keep up this work. What I've seen this morning as well, it's very impressive. And I would like to end the presentation with a call for action. So if you have data sets available from anywhere in Europe, please come to me, please send it to me, and we will make sure this kind of data gets available for every farmer in the European Union. Thank you very much.
Great. I could say I told you so, right? These were 3 really great presentations. Let me capture a bit the essential messages, and then we'll open it up to the floor and we can have people respond to whatever question. First of all, you know that the pineapple is the symbol of Inspire. Apparently a director from DG Environment, and as an agency we respect DG Environment a lot, called it a coconut. Yeah, a bit hard to crack. I think today we've seen that it can also be a passion fruit, right? So let's go for the passion fruit model. A couple of remarks. First of all, I think it's clear here that this whole undertaking serves a purpose. There are needs, there are services embedded in this whole undertaking. This is not the playground of IT people or of network people or of enforcers or of, and I say that with great respect, but because I don't have those capacities, of digital nerds. Yeah, that is not what it is. It is, we do it because there is a need and there are services to be derived from the whole undertaking. 2, I think it's clear that there are many different levels of use. It goes from the field to the city to the grid, very different levels of analysis, and it talks about the multifunctionality of the platform that is there, of the approach that is there. 2, I think it's obvious that it doesn't automatically lead to more sustainable decisions. You need to put this information to work with a particular teleology, you know, with the goal to make better sustainable decisions. The third thing, and I think Arash's presentation was very clear there, Janneke's as well. Data visualization and framing can play an important role. Yeah? The way in which you present things can really put people in a different mindset and create a new type of thinking around the same sort of data. The fourth point is that I think this type of data and data sharing is not by definition empowering. It becomes empowering if you put it in a particular context and if you stimulate people to actually make better decisions. Yeah, when Janneke's father started the company, he wanted to make better decisions on his field. Data per se is data. Yeah? We need to put it to use. The fifth point, and I think that's where Claire was very clear, is that it can facilitate real-time type of decisions. This massive amount of data, if it's available at the right time, you can make decisions on how you put existing infrastructure to better use or how you can connect infrastructure in a better way. And six, and you will not be surprised that it comes from somebody who works in an official public function, I think it's also obvious that this whole undertaking requires public governance. Yeah? It's public governance that is providing the direction, that is stimulating an integrated and uniform approach to a certain extent, and also, and I think Claire was very clear there, that provides a certain protection, because we all know that today one of the big discussions on data is how much are we giving up and how well are we protected as individuals in this massive ocean of data. So, these were some of my reflections on the panel. I will come back for 1 minute in the end, but I would like to open it up to you now. There are 2 microphones. If you have a question, if you want to know where you can buy that field that Janneke talked about, or, feel free to take the microphone, ask your question. This is your chance. Okay, since the first question is always the most difficult, I suggest we start with the second question. Anybody? Good, then I will do, this is prepared, right? I will do what is usually done, but we said let's not start with that. I would like the 3 of you to maybe reflect on what the others have brought to the table. What stimulated you in particular as being entrepreneurs, working with this type of data? Were there elements that stimulated you to think out of your own box? Because we're all in our own box. Yeah? Could you please comment on each other? Janneke, do you want to start?
Well, I would say Veolia. It has it's more elements in it. So it has waste, water, and energy. So, and that where I focus more on one particular field. I was impressed that it had more elements in it than only one. And well, you need extra clever people to get something out of it and to make tools that are understandable. That was, from your presentation, something that struck me.
What is funny is that what struck me was actually the mirror of that, in that when you go deep in a sector like you did, you can imagine so many new services because you focus on, let's say, several populations, but with very specific needs. And then you have to listen to what they expect, which with exactly the same technology has nothing to do with just a neighbor. And so this capacity to listen, to imagine new services, and to find an echo very quickly, as you mentioned the figures, when a service is needed, once you promote it, it finds quite easily it's public, then after it needs more investment, but you can have with digital technology a very quick return on, is it a good idea, is it something that people need? So this is impressive.
Yeah. Arash?
Yeah, well, for me, I think that looking at your presentations, it sums up the title, the name of the conference so well, because when I'm speaking for myself, I really get inspired when I go outside of my own realm, outside of my own practice, outside of my own profession, and looking at your presentations, you really are bringing up so many of these elements that I did not yet think of yet, for instance, in my own practice. And one of the things that we are starting to work on right now is also the idea that, for instance, you're using cadastral data and a bunch of other data sets to really get an insight on farmlands. We can actually do the same thing when looking at the energy transition in the built environment, for instance. Using cadastral data, knowing a building, using data from municipalities, combining these different streams and defining actually upfront already what the impact potential is of doing some installation work on a certain building could, for instance, provide such terrific insights that makes it very easy for policymakers as well as entrepreneurs to come up with solutions that are very viable and how do you say it, easy to quickly implement and actually make an impact in this energy transition. So for me, looking at your presentations is really giving a host of new ideas that are they recorded? We need to actually be able to look back at them because there's a lot of value there.
I don't know, but I see people in the first row nodding, and it's in this direction, so the answer is
that's
yes.
good. That's a good direction.
They are recorded and they will be...
Unless they're Greek.
Yes, available,
yeah.
yes. Did we sign all the necessary paperwork for us to agree that we would be recorded? I don't know. Okay. Claire, do you want to add to your observations on the two other presentations?
Yeah, as you say, you mentioned, Janneke, that we need to be clever. It's actually not us alone who need to be clever. We need to create and participate into a place where creativity of everyone can be expressed. For instance, the consultancy cabinet we created was because we noticed that in groups like us, it's sometimes hard to think out of the box. And having someone who knows you, so it doesn't discover with you everything new, but knows you and is able to make you think out of the box to, okay, these are technologies, what are you going to do, what can you invent, is really something that we need to propose to our customers, just to give them space to be able to think out of the box about what are the data, first to know it, and then what can I imagine new for my data. So it's something really important to organize, or at least to have a place where creativity can express, especially for public authorities, which have not always inside themselves this place.
Okay, the three of them are in a sort of box. I'm behind the box. Let's come out of the box. Has anybody by now thought of a brilliant question or intervention to make? Please feel free. And please introduce yourself briefly. Thank you.
My name is Eidís. I'm from the National Land Survey of Iceland. It might be interesting, though you were talking about access to data and so on, what you feel as the most hindering things in the access to data. Is it just the standard? Is it the technology, that I guess not, as what you presented? Or is it just a personal hindering or licensing or whatever?
I can say something about that. It's not so much the standards, because we have some technical people that really can, well, if we get a data set, they will find a way to get it visualized. It is who to get to, where to go in each country. If you look in Germany, then you have all the different states. You need to go to each individual state, which is for a company, an SME company like us, it's undoable. So getting access to the data it's more people work. Yeah, if we would like to have it from the complete European Union, we would have one full-time person can work on that every day, calling people, and usually it takes a long time, and you need more than one call. You maybe need a few more, and then they get to know you, and that you're really a trustworthy company, and so it's more a people thing, giving you the data, than it is a standard thing.
The others on that question?
I agree with the fact that it's absolutely not let's say, technological issue. It's really which problem do we want to solve, which benefit do we want to improve, and being able to define a path together, and after that, finding the data to improve the situation will be not easy but feasible. But because the amount of data is so huge, you have to focus your efforts, your investment on finding, analyzing, data visualizing the data, which will improve the situation, which will make a difference.
Yes, and I have to fully agree, which makes this panel very boring. But no, but it's true, and I believe that there's so much data in the world that we can access. What we do lack oftentimes, though, is the I believe that we're a bit biased towards large amounts of data, where the value is not created by accessing large amounts of data, it's by accessing data in the right way, so you can actually draw conclusions from that, and that can actually be a very small amount of data or something that's been around all the time and nobody ever looked at it. So one of the things that we, I do a lot of work with academics, for instance, and very well educated people, but I firmly believe that we need to combine these skills that are usually very highly skilled within a box with the skills of artists, for instance, or entrepreneurs, or free thinkers, because by combining those skills we can actually use the same data in entirely new ways and come up with solutions that nobody has ever thought of before, that actually address problems that are very large and very alive. So it is really combining the human creativity with the ability to access amounts of data and sources of data in smart ways.
Thank you. A follow-up question from Iceland, yes?
Yes, I'm not from Iceland. I'm Ingrid van den Bergen from the Belgian Mapping Agency. But I'm also, no problem. I am also the head of, the president of Eurogeographics, which is the association of mapping agencies, cadastral agencies and land registries in Europe. Now, I was triggered to come to this microphone by the thing Hanneke was saying about the fact that the biggest problem was access to know where to go. And I was triggered because you said as an SME, it's difficult for us to know what and where. Now, we as Eurogeographics are trying to build European location services, which is a platform where you could access any data from any mapping agency, cadastral agency, land registry in Europe through one platform so that you would have easy access. And trying to build this, we have asked Gartner, which is not just some company, to do a market analysis for us. And the answer we got was that besides the European Commission, there is no market for these services. So I am quite happy to hear you say this is what we need, but at the same time I can understand, because it's a big challenge and it doesn't come for free, that somehow Gartner says there is no market willing to pay for the development of this service. So once it's there, there will be a market, but how do we get there? And then I would like in this audience to ask people in the European Commission to think with us about how to get there. Because it is an investment, it needs time and money, and I think there is really a need for SMEs, like you say, to have this kind of platform where they don't have to worry, where can I find this data? Is it harmonized? Is it cross-border integrated? What's the licensing conditions? No, one door where they can find what they need and do something interesting with it. And so I hope, I dare express the hope that we can come to some innovative ideas, maybe with some artists or professors or whatever, to get this thing real. Thank you.
Thank you, Ingrid. I think it speaks to the broader point that I don't think, if I think in sustainability transitions and these systems, it's a false dichotomy to think in a separation between public and private. I think it's quite obvious that if we really want to tackle these issues, we will have to cleverly look at what it is we want to do, which partners are crucial to get there, whether they are public, private, semi-public, semi-private, and then try to put the right network of people there that connects, to speak so, the satellite builder and the technology person to the farmer on the field. And we need a lot of people and a lot of networking in between to really do that in a clever way. When the colleague from Iceland took the floor, I thought you were getting worried about competition on the glacier market with the glaciers in the desert. But anyway, any other question? We have another question there. Please introduce yourself briefly.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Gabriele Giannini and I work for the European Commission in DG Agriculture. I have a common concern in the several tools that I think exist for supporting farmers. So I really appreciate all the efforts being done for sharing the data and metadata through portals, Inspire and other portals, but I think there should be an effort, and maybe there is already, to make a network between also the tools that we use to take advantage of this data. So your colleague has spoken now about this Burenbunder, which is a farm support tool, as far as I understand. But yesterday there was a presentation of Fatima, a tool supported under the Horizon 2020. So I suppose there are many of these tools, and why not networking these tools and maybe either making a more standardized tool that can serve all purposes, or at least share the advantages of these tools so that they are linked to each other and they don't double the efforts. Thank you.
Janneke, do you want to comment on that? I think it's a bit in the triangle of you need content, you need the IT tools, and you need the network around it. And it's in that triangle that we are operating. And I think the food system is one of the hardest nuts to crack, actually, when it comes to this whole sort of approach. And I'm very encouraged to see that in the discussions on the European Common Agricultural Policy Next Generation, that there is a clear link with Copernicus as a monitoring tool, and also that there is an openness to share data on which the agricultural sector has been sitting for decades, environmental data that was not shared at the European level. So I think from an environment perspective, there is an enormous potential in this new round when it comes to content, when it comes to networking in a different way, and to setting up maybe more uniform IT and tools to access that new level of data access and data availability. But that's from a governance perspective. I don't know whether, Janneke, you would like to add something to that? No. All right. Thank you, colleague, for the question. We've got another question there.
Yes, my name is Jan-Erik Bulens from Wageningen Environmental Research. It was an interesting overview for all three of you, showing the concept of what you do and what you see. I think that's very valuable. And I see also that you underline the importance of Inspire behind it. I expect you are relatively an outsider from Inspire, and I know a lot of the developments in the past, in the recent past, are signed or are drawn by disruptions, in fact. Within Inspire, I see a lot of developments going well, but there are also developments which are turned out to be not so well. So from an outsider point of view, could you reflect on what would be, and I don't expect that you are going to predict a disruption, but what would you say in the current situation would be very helpful to change the way that we are now working, or to make the concept which you on the line, to make it really working.
I see intelligent nodding in the box there, but somebody wants to take the floor on that? Claire, how about you?
I think what you mentioned about inventing new ways of collaborating together is absolutely key. And as the president of the Eurogeographics mentioned, how do we make, let's say, public authorities providing infrastructure, providing data, meets issues from people trying to invent and sell services? And I think this borders now has to be less obvious. For instance, if a public institution provide a service of, let's say, raw data, it has to be able to think about what are going to be the use of them. It doesn't mean having a business model for that. It doesn't mean selling services. It has to just to create a place where these two worlds meet more naturally and quicker, so that the work of the researcher, for instance, can from time to time speak with, let's say, more business-oriented entities, and on the other end, where these business-oriented entities can express their short-term needs. So it's this kind of zone that has to become more open, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Arash?
Yeah, well, it's funny that you're from Wageningen University, because we used to work very close with the university, and somehow the university also got more commercial. So there's sometimes a tendency of being the university, giving data freely. There's also a business model needs to be behind it, and our company. So that will be for me something that we should work on. That the companies and the universities work together again, instead of starting to be in a commercial competition on certain fields.
Any follow-up there, or?
I think you're right concerning breaking up the academia in an open world, more open worlds. Also, I think the viewpoint from the Commission with the Open Science Cloud and that kind of things. And it also strengthens what is in the PSI directive. So I guess I really agree with you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for agreeing. I think one of the critical undertones was a bit that not everything in the Inspire idea has been the sort of rosy, easy implemented, and I think this community knows that better than any other community. I think to a certain extent we're 10 years on. It's a highly technology-driven undertaking. The technology has changed, the potential has changed, the volume has changed, the users have changed. So I'm not surprised that this is a sort of, you could say, developing area where serious and frank and open discussions in the spirit of Inspire, I might underline, are what is driving this forward in a direction that is adapted to the new innovation that is in this field, to the new needs that are in this field, and to an increasingly better understanding of what is available and how it can be put to use. So I'm not surprised that this is an area where you have an ongoing debate that sometimes goes smoothly and sometimes has a bit of a bump in the road or even a sharp edge. But I mean, that's how these things go, right? It's not because we speak about smart and digital and network that it's all rounded and smooth necessarily. So being the realist that I am, I think that is part of this community and of us as an agency also deeply involved in it, to have that type of debates and to work in the spirit of what ultimately we want to use through this Inspire undertaking. We've got another question.
Yes, thank you, Jean-Claude Jaslet from the Walloon Regional Authority here in Belgium. Well, I am in the same subject that you've discussed a minute ago. I was struck by the presentation of Arash, and especially the point about the grid electric grids that were installed 10 or 15 years ago and that have to be replaced by glass fiber. And I'm thinking Inspire is also an infrastructure, so we must prepare to replace it by the next special infrastructure for Europe. And I'm very curious, and I'm certainly not alone, to know what we must prepare for. And the question is mainly for the European Commission and the agency, but also for the panelists, of course. So it's common, but I don't know if you have an idea of the future, what's next?
Well, I don't think this is in the remit or the mandate of the panelists, nor in the mandate or the remit of the agency. We're a supporting organization, so I will happily hand over this stimulating, forward-looking question to the colleagues from the Commission. So if anybody would like to take the floor, and otherwise I'm sure this will be discussed during the remainder of the conference. Yeah, and I'm not saying that to evade the question. I don't think any of the four of us has a mandate or the capacity to answer that question in the way you may expect the answer. Yeah.
Well, I would like to state, though, that first of all, yes, I'm not mandated to say anything about what the grid of the future is going to look like. But one of the things that I see is when I get to do a lot of work in sub-Saharan Africa. And one of the things there is that there's been a massive rollout of a mobile telephony grid, mobile communication grid throughout the entire continent, despite the fact that there's no physical electrical grid throughout the continent, which means that all these masts for communications are actually powered by solar energy. So this is an entirely new, different concept of grid design, and I think that we as Europeans also can draw a lot of inspiration from what is happening on the African continent. Seeing the frog leaps that are being undertaken there, and actually using this liberty of mind and thought and creating business models to see what we can apply of that within this continent also.
Okay, thank you. We have time for one more question. Okay. If not, does any of the panelists want to make a sort of final statement? You know, go out on a bang. You know,
Hans.
Give it to the audience. This is your opportunity.
Hans, hello. There was.
Oh, one more. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
It's not a question. It's maybe an answer, or at least a personal view. I'm Hugo de Groof from the European Commission, from DG Environment. Of course, your presentations have fueled, energized, and actually nourished me, to say it in the spirit of the three types of presentations with a lot of ideas. Now, when I heard a colleague talk about Inspire Next Generation, right? Now think about grids, think about European, trans-European networks, where everything is being connected. The Inspire idea, initially, was meant essentially to start connecting the different government authorities, to start sharing the data that they were kind of hoarding within their own organization, so that together they could develop better services for the citizens and to make the government function more efficiently. The reuse of all the data which was covered by Inspire was basically covered by the reuse of public sector information, and that has been a long story of developments, of small steps forward, one step backward, and so on. And we're now entering into a new period, indeed, where we could start thinking about a further development of this infrastructure. Now, again, fueled by the different presentations that you had, and thinking about a next step of Inspire, where we truly enter into a public-private partnership, which also will involve the citizens in bringing their data online. The entire grid system that Arash was talking about is not only about energy, it's also about what actually fuels our economy, our data economy, and it's the data itself. It will start coming from so many different sources, and it will be put to so many different uses. If I was just thinking about what you presented, Janneke, about the farms. Now, the farms are energy producers, consumers. There are degrees of taxation, green capital. They are a tremendous source of information and data, not just for production or food, but also waste production. The agricultural economy produces waste as well. So the connectivity then between the work, for example, of Veolia, using the data from the agricultural sector, again, the energy production, energy consumption. Recently in Belgium with the droughts, there was a big factory of deep freeze vegetables. They were actually depending on their suppliers who didn't have any more water or not enough water. And they redirected, they developed a whole new system, a grid, to transfer the used data of their cooling systems to the fields. So they were connecting, maybe not data, physical infrastructure, but it would function a little bit in the same way. So now instead of having the silo just around agriculture, around waste and energy, also these will get connected. So if we're thinking about a new Inspire, a spatial data infrastructure, it will definitely serve, or has to serve, much wider community of clients, a much wider community of use cases than is currently the case. Not that many years ago, somebody from one member state said, I have a perfect infrastructure, but I have no clients for it, right? And I made a remark, you have no goods to transport on your perfect infrastructure. There's no data on environment. Something is going wrong in the entry of the good, the data, into the system. Because Inspire never requires anybody to collect data or to share data beyond between public government authorities. That's what they have. So from that point of view, it's just a very small part of an infrastructure which the next generation will maybe have a completely different name, but it will emerge. I am absolutely certain about that. Thank you.
Thank you. This brings us to the end of the panel. Maybe a couple of final conclusions. I think the panel was on how we can put this to use for the green economy. Speaking from an Environment Agency perspective, we are at a TINA moment. There is no alternative. What's the alternative to the green economy? The brown economy? You know, just saying it makes it almost futile to think in that way. We have no alternative for the circular economy. Read the work of the International Resource Panel. Availability, access to resources is critical. In Europe, we have very few of them, so it's even more critical for Europe. Think of the fact that we are 1.1 degree above pre-industrial temperatures. We are on a trajectory, even under the current promises under Paris, to well above 3 degrees. We are starting to see impacts that there is no alternative. We will need to go to a low-carbon future. Our natural capital keeps degrading on this planet. This is not a foundation for a healthy food system or for the environmental services that we expect, or societal services from natural capital. So there is no alternative. In fact, the sort of integrating knowledge there on planetary boundaries is rather obvious today. It speaks about a safe operating space. We are starting to go outside of that safe operating space as humanity in several dimensions. We will require all the intelligence that we have, not only artificial intelligence. There's quite a bit of, space above our heads to use our own intelligence as well. Huh? And I think we can do that better, and we can use better technology, better information, better systems to tackle this challenge of the 21st century of living well within the limits of the planet. We're going to have to do it with 10, 11 billion people, and we are not on that trajectory. So big data as such, is it going to solve the issue? No. Are networks going to solve the issue? No. People are going to solve the problems that we are facing, and we have to make use of everything that we have developed, and that is one of the reasons why I think Inspire is so important. Do we have time left? Yeah, maybe a bit. But sustainable development, people always speak about the next generations. I'm sorry, but that is a fallacy. It's this generation. If you are born today in Europe, especially as a girl, you will be alive in 2100, yeah? You will be alive. It's this generation that will either, make the 21st century the best century that we've ever had, or the worst century that we've ever had as humanity. So we are working towards the same goal. Let's put it to the best use. We badly need your knowledge and your information and your capacities, because we're not going to get there without it, but it's not the solution as such. We will need to work together on bringing this type of information to our societies. And some of us think we're in the lead. That's where the networking is important, and we need to bring it to the public and to the customer and to the farmer and to the others. Because if you think you're leading but nobody is following, I'm sorry, but you're just taking a walk. Yeah? And I'm not in this business to take a walk. I'm in this business to make a difference. Yeah? And I think we are all in this business to make a difference. I would like to thank the panelists for a fantastic panel. It is now 12:33. We started 3 minutes late, so we have stuck exactly to the 90-minute time slot. I would like to thank all of you. Have a great continuation of the conference. Thank you.